And today I'm with Catalina Duque from Sangre Foundation in Colombia, and we're going to talk about peace, we're going to talk about nonviolence, we're going to talk about the social situation in Colombia and the activities and project of the foundation. Catalina, welcome to Face to Face.
Thank you very much, David. Very happy to be here today.
We start about the foundation, the work you are doing, and can you give us an overview a little bit of what is the situation in Colombia and in parallel to the peace process?
Sure.
And the pandemic,
I guess I can believe by sharing a little bit of my experience of growing up in Colombia, a country that has suffered more than 50 years of an armed conflict, very complex with very different actors. And I guess all Colombians grew up in the middle of a beautiful country with very rich in culturally and in terms of biodiversity. But unfortunately, we also grew up full of fear. I actually recall a childhood with bombs and kidnaps surrounding and many manifestations of violence that really have affected, I would say, most of Colombians. Of course, there are people, especially in the rural areas, who have been highly impacted by this. Colombia has more than 9 million victims, direct victims of the armed conflict.
Yeah.
And we have one of the highest rates of internal displacement, for instance. 4 years ago, the Colombian government signed a peace treaty with the oldest left-wing guerrilla from Latin America, FARC.
Yeah.
And I believe it was a very important step to address the root causes of violence in Colombia, including land distribution, including political participation and deepening the democracy, among others. But of course, signing a peace treaty is only a first step, because we believe in Sangre that peace is not signed on a table of a negotiation process, but in the table, the daily table. So in the table of at home, the dinner table, or in schools or in communities, everyone has to commit to reconciliation and to build a culture of peace. Sangre Foundation has been working for 15 years to mobilize different actors, to activate ecosystems, to develop local capacity, especially in young people, so they can become active agents of change.
So, Catalina, how did the foundation came about?
So 15 years ago, our co-founder, Juanes, he's a multi-Grammy award winner, and he's always been very, I'm sorry, I need to cough. Hold on a second.
Sorry.
Sorry about
that.
Yeah. It's not COVID, luckily. I drank the wrong way. It went the wrong way.
Okay.
Sorry. Sorry for that. So about how it began. Juanes, our co-founder, he's a multi-Grammy award winner, and he's been very sensible to the situation in Colombia, and actually he wrote many songs. I'm sorry, but I'm still.
Yeah, we have been in contact with Juanes when we did the World March for Peace and Nonviolence, and we went to Colombia, and he helped us to go to the border with. I think it was with Venezuela, and we organized a big concert there. I mean, he was really he moved it was very touching to see him in action and doing all of this. It was a great support in Colombia. Yeah,
exactly. And everyone who knows his music will know that many of his songs talk about the reality in Colombia, the victims, talking about the ideal to build peace in Colombia, etc. So he wrote a specific song talking about landmines. And because of that song, he became involved in several national campaigns and started to get in touch with different victims and people directly affected by this situation. And he decided to create this foundation with a very big dream to contribute to peace building in Colombia. During the first years, we dedicated our work specifically to provide support for victims of landmines. But as we have evolved,
of course,
decided to broaden that scope and to actually invest our energy and our resources in a more preventive approach. This means empowering young people and giving the tools, the capacities, and the right connections for them to contribute to peace building and reconciliation in their own communities.
So how do you work on building this peace? How do you work with the youth? How does the peace building process happen? What is your experience, and what did you learn from doing it during all these years?
Sure, David. Well, we have a very comprehensive approach, actually what we call it a systemic approach, in the sense that we tackle the root causes and we try to involve as many actors as possible in this process. So for instance, we have different levels of intervention. One is within public schools in very vulnerable areas that have been affected by conflict and where children are constantly at risk of being recruited to armed gangs, to armed groups, illegal armed groups, or other risks such as substance abuse or different kind of risks that children and youth face in the streets. So here we train teachers in methodologies that we have developed using arts and culture as pedagogical languages to develop socio-emotional skills like empathy, like conflict resolution, assertive communication, critical thinking, among others that are fundamental for risk prevention and violence prevention. And this is also a learning journey that allows them to become more empowered to transform the culture within schools at the beginning. We've seen incredible results in this level of intervention. And as years passed by, we decided to go a step further beyond the walls of the school, which is obviously very important, and working with different protective environments like the school itself, but also the parents and other community-based organizations. With Leaders of Change, which is this second level, we basically reach youth at risk, and we do a learning process, or we run a learning experience where they discover their powers as peace builders. They discover their passions, the skills, etc. And then they start reading the context to understand the root causes of violence in their local communities.
So what is roughly the age of how the kids get involved through? It's very early, or it's in like middle school, high school? What is the process?
So the first level of intervention is more or less from 8 years to 14 years old. The second level goes from 14 or 16, I would say, up to 28 years, because in this level, they actually design solutions for the problems that identify. And when we talk about peace, at least in Mi Sangre, we understand that in a broad sense, meaning we're talking more about building a culture of peace. So therefore, the youth who are involved identify initiatives or causes that are quite broad. Some of them are around reconciliation. Some of them are around gender violence prevention. Others are more about building a peaceful coexistence through arts and culture. Different ideas that they have are innovative and very applicable to their own realities. And about 4 years ago, sorry, go ahead, David.
No, I would just try to understand, how do they see the repercussion of what they do, of their work? Do you see,
yes.
I mean, can they see it as at the building the social fabric of their neighborhood or their community?
Absolutely. It's really fascinating to see the transformative power of a young person who has been supported and recognized, because sometimes it's difficult to understand that young people who joined an armed group doesn't really do it consciously, or it's not a conscious decision, and it is not necessarily because they want to be part of that armed group, or not even because of an economic need, which of course plays a role, but it is much more related to their needs of being part of something bigger than themselves.
That's very clear.
Recognized. And so the moment you start investing in them and supporting them, and the moment they start feeling that they belong to a larger movement because they start working in youth groups, etc., you can see very, very profound transformations. For instance, we have several cases where we've seen and witnessed how they decide not only to say no to joining an armed group, but that they have actually gone out to dedicate themselves to their own initiatives. That is the case of Candelo, for instance, who decided to create a hip-hop school in his community to protect other children from the same risks. Others do so by creating environmental groups and creating different initiatives around that. Like they find a passion, they find a purpose, and they channel that energy into something different. So yes, it's very
significant. Now the question is, for the older generation, does political involvement exist? Does it start to get connected to because I know it was an issue with the peace process, and the referendum linked to the peace process was the vote to support the yes to the peace process lost. So and I think the youth, I don't know if they got the message, but politically it's important for them to also look at this avenue.
Absolutely, David. That's a very good question, because actually 4 years ago, while we were still focusing in community-based initiatives and change agents, but very at the community level, we saw the need precisely after the referendum, which for those of you who don't know, at the beginning we had a big abstention, and unfortunately the vote, which seems unbelievable, won the no for signing the peace process. So at that moment we thought we need to go a step further. We need to support young people to be more involved in the political process. And that's our third level of intervention. We go a step forward and we train them and support them in different ways of political participation. In Colombia, there are many, many mechanisms. Unfortunately, not everyone knows about them, but they create, for example, youth platforms, which is an official platform or an official way of participating and making sure that young people's voices are heard in the political decision-making process. Or a couple of years ago, they run a big mobilization campaign to incentivize youth or young voters to come out and vote and do so in an informed way. And it was actually the year with the highest turnout in Colombian history. We actually, when they move into this level, they can join the national network of young peace builders. So this is an additional benefit or a way to continue that passion and that level of engagement, because they start exchanging knowledge, collaborating to do bigger transformations. We have presence in more than 130 municipalities in around 10 states, departments, they're called in Colombia. And we've seen great results also in terms of influencing public policy.
So you go beyond Medellin with the base,
yes,
your base place, and you were able to reach out to cover more or less the territory, or how does this work?
Yes, we work in many, as I said, in more than 120 municipalities.
Wow.
Mainly in Antioquia, which is the region where Medellin is, but also in Sucre, in Bolívar, in very remote areas of Colombia where there's also very little presence of the state. So it's important for organizations like this to come and start, and that's the fourth level of intervention, also weaving partnerships and learning ecosystems with very diverse actors. We bring together universities, schools, government officials, different NGO leaders, community-based leaders, so we can learn from each other, collaborate, and accelerate change. So it's not only the direct services that we offer, which is very, very important, and perhaps that's where we see the most tangible impact. But because we want to accelerate change and to scale what we do, we're also collaborating with many different actors to be able to scale up our work.
So if you were to sit down tomorrow in front of big strengths, political figures, social leaders of organization or other people who can, what will be your request? What do you see should happen tomorrow to be able to really secure peace and develop nonviolence and develop a democratical society where everyone has a space?
Well,
sorry if it's a broad question, but
it's very broad and it's very challenging. It's very difficult. I would say that the biggest issue in Colombia is around inequality. We have a very, very high Gini coefficient. Wealth is concentrated in a very few individuals. And so I think that's one of the biggest challenges of our country, and that requires things that were actually agreed in the peace process, and unfortunately not all of them has yet been fulfilled. As I said at the beginning, there's a challenge around land distribution, a challenge around deepening democracy and ensuring there's more participation and more diversity in the democratic process, and that's part of what we do as Sangre, but we need more and more people doing this kind of work, because it obviously requires as well a certain level of education and pedagogy to understand these processes and to understand the broader context. So I would say those two are the most important.
Catalina, we are almost at the end of this discussion. Two things. One is, do you have project? Do you want to very specifically talk about it? And two, did you have any asking or any plug you want for people to know?
Yes, well, we have many challenging projects this year. Of course, these are even more challenging because of the pandemic. Colombia had a really long lockdown. Unfortunately, gender-based violence increased significantly during the pandemic. And this is why, among different projects, we're taking a strong focus in 2021 in this matter. Very innovative projects, not only with training, as I described, and strengthening protective environments, but we're also developing an app based on blockchain to facilitate protection of women when they face this kind of violence. We're always seeking for support, any donation, even small donations. We recently launched a program for membership-based donations, like small recurrent donations a month. So I think you can see in the screen right now where you can donate, but also if you're interested in contributing your knowledge, with the services that you give, you can contact us through the web page, and we'll be happy to share what we do. more in depth to explore possibilities for collaboration.
So thank you very much for the interview. Just for you to get in the context, the disparity between the rich and the poor is not just in Colombia. In the US, it has been also very clear during the pandemic, and the disparity has been affected million people in poverty and so on and so forth. So I think some of the issues you were talking go beyond Colombia and are more domestic violence in the US increased by 20 or 25% also during the pandemic. So this is issue that we need to cover at the wild world level, or at least in our hemisphere. And so thank you so much for the work you are doing. Thank you so much for being in the show. And if you have any, in the future, any important information, please come back, and we will be more than happy to have you in the show again.
Thank you so much, David. I really appreciate this space.
You're welcome. So that was your show Face to Face, and please keep watching your news on presenza.com, and we hope to hear and see you very soon. Thank you very much.